Okay.
Cool. See you later.
Hey everybody, welcome to Brainfood Live on Air. We are live, and I can tell you that for a fact because we're just doing some back office shenanigans as we came on screen. But this is how it goes. So welcome everybody to Brainfood Live on Air. It's episode 65. Delighted to bring you here today. We're with you every Friday, by the way. So make sure you follow the channel if you enjoy this type of conversation. We're super excited today because we've got an outstanding topic that we I wonder whether I've neglected a little bit. So apologies to all my recruiter agency friends out there, because I tend to focus on different parts of recruitment, but I've never really focused hard enough, I think, on the third party space. And this is what today's topic is going to be about. What is the future of recruitment agencies in the post-COVID world? How can recruitment agents survive and thrive in this new reality that we're starting to see kind of emerge as we come and open up the economy? Anyway, welcome everybody for this. But before we kick off, as usual, we do a quick sound check on all of the channels that we're on. So everyone on Crowdcast, if you can hear me, please say hello. I think I can see it on the chat stream there, so it looks pretty good. We are multicasting, folks, into LinkedIn Live. Can you just give me a quick hello and say, yes, I can hear you fine. That would be great to know. Also on Facebook, we are multicasting there in the Facebook group. If you can watch this and hear me, say, yes, Hong, I can hear you. Please get on with it. Okay, looks like we're getting some comments there, which is perfect. I think we're good to go. Anyway, folks, I'm super excited today, especially today, because once again, Adam Gordon has been upgraded. As everyone knows, I always try to do this every week. Now and again, I fail, but sometimes I pull it off. And yeah, Adam's off, which is great news. And he's been upgraded by Louise Triance. Louise, what a pleasure to invite you back on to Brainfood Live on Air to co-host this show with me.
Thank you very much. I obviously didn't cock it up last time, so that's delightful to be back.
You know what? Even if you did cock it up, I think it would be okay. Because, we cock it up all the time anyway, and it's generally fine. I think people are pretty much forgiving of live stuff. Anyway, before we kick off properly, a quick word to our sponsors today. We're sponsored by our friends at Past Technologies. If you are doing any kind of background checking, Past Technologies provides a one-stop shop for you to validate these candidates before you make the hiring decision. And it's actually a growing market, actually, because, as it's all doom and gloom in most of the recruitment tech world, it seems there's certain aspects that seem to be getting huge demand, and validation of people and candidates particularly is one of those. So check out Past Technologies. They're a cool company. They're they're global. I believe they're in the UK, Australia, and other places also, South Africa also. Check them out in the chat stream there if you are in the business of getting an improved background checking solution. Anyway, so Louise, let's get on with this. Firstly, did you read the newsletter last week? And if so, what was interesting in it?
I did, because that's the rules. I have to read it.
It is indeed.
Yeah, and I did find a couple of interesting things. I know you were going to say this yourself, but if Mark's ready to come on screen in a minute, he needs to say hi in the sidebar. Not them telling you how to do the show, but you'll never find him because there's loads of Marks registered.
He might be Mark Dorman, though. If he's called himself Mark Dorman, we'll be able to spot him.
I'll leave that with you. So I found one thing which I thought I ought to find interesting, but couldn't entirely get my head around. Which was the psychology of design and the cognitive biases and principles. So I thought I'm going to love that. But I found it super complicated.
Really?
So
okay.
Yeah, I'm going to read it again this weekend because I reckon it's really important. But I really struggle with it. And I love that sort of thing. I don't know what you thought of it.
No, that's really interesting for you to say, because it is one of those where you think, you know what, everyone's got these. I think we're getting much more familiar with the idea that we're not just rational people making these objective decisions. I think we're embracing the fact that we are pretty much a bias in terms of how we make those decisions. But this is a really interesting project where they're hoping to list common cognitive biases and then give you sort of an explanation as to what that is and how it progresses, and how you can spot it, so that at least you're aware of this bias if you're susceptible to it. And they've produced a beautiful website. I think they've only got 10 in there, so I'm quite keen to support them, because I'd love to see it get to 50, 60 or whatever it is, so that we can have a much more viable tool. But I totally appreciate what you're saying. Sometimes it's hard to get your head around stuff that's about your head, So folks, I've just shared it in the chat stream. Go ahead and take a look at it. It is a wonderful website, by the way. Great on the top of UX, but I think they did a fantastic job on the UX on that website also. So please do check it out. Okay. What else is interesting, Louise?
I read, finally, I closed my LinkedIn.
Oh, yes.
And, it made me laugh. But do you know the person who wrote it yourself before I criticize?
I don't know the guy, but let's not go too personal in the criticism.
No, of course. Oh, you know me, I'm soft as anything. It was just that he said that he'd been thinking about closing his LinkedIn for ages, and he wasn't really using it, and he didn't have more than 500 connections, and he wasn't a recruiter, and so he closed it, and nothing happened. And I felt like, well, duh. He wasn't using it. He'd made no effort to use it as a networking tool, as a tool for finding a job, as a tool for anything. And then he stopped using it. And then he wrote about it. Have I missed something there?
You know what? You've not missed anything. Basically, that's the story. And I thought that was interesting, because I was like all over the place with this post. By the way, let me just share. I think I've already shared it. So basically, this is a guy who made the big announcement, I'm leaving LinkedIn, which obviously, big gesture and so on. But then he goes on to talk about the fact he never got a job through there. But I'm thinking, how do you know that? Probably a recruiter has verified. If they've not found you on there, they've at least done a LinkedIn search. So, I mean, let me know, folks. I mean, if you found a candidate via a CV, do you or do you not check LinkedIn afterwards? I think almost always. Yes. Right? I mean, am I crazy? You always do at least validate that, but that signal doesn't sort of wash back to the candidate. In which case, this fellow here, and he didn't feel that he got that opportunity that way. But then he did say some things that were true, in the sense that it is a playground for recruiters and salespeople. And because we're recruiters and we're salespeople, we're always in it. And because we're always in it, we have this, actually we talk about bias, we have this tunnel vision. LinkedIn is the universe. And oftentimes we don't understand that for most people, it isn't. Our friend Irina Shemaeva said something really quite profound, I think. First time I saw a speech, she said, look, most people are on LinkedIn because they feel that they should be. Not because there's any kind of impulse or, sense that they enjoy being there or whatever. It's like, if I'm not there, I would look weird on a professional basis. If you're a, white collar worker, you don't have a LinkedIn, probably you'd be judged a little bit, I would say. Like, people would ask the question, why is that? In fact, I wonder whether people can comment on this. I mean, what do you think, everybody? If you found a candidate, looks brilliant, fantastic, but literally decided not to have a LinkedIn profile, do you then have a judgment against that person somehow? Would you have a doubt in your mind? Yes or no? Comment in the chat stream. I'd love to get your feeling on that. I would personally say, yeah.
I think for lots of jobs, I think for lots of roles, you would wonder why they didn't. I mean, the other thing I'd say about people who go onto LinkedIn and don't use it and don't get any value from it is that I know that even if you're not a recruiter, even if you're not a salesperson, you could get value, because you would start connecting with people who are writing interesting stuff. You'd start watching live streams. There's loads of ways in which you could get value. But if all you did was register an account and only connect with 7 people, then but you're not going to get value from Facebook if that's how you use Facebook. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I think with this guy is a bit of a caveat. He is a tech guy as well. So I think he's hypersensitive to data and privacy and what have you, very elevated sense as to what those principles are. So I think he was always naturally defensive. And because of his defensive nature, he never allowed his LinkedIn profile to grow, so to speak, to the point where he did find value in it. And, credit to him, he's had success, he's bailed out of it, and that's all well and good. And the thing is, I would say have a read of the post, but let's not take that as advice, because probably for 99% of the people out there, even for people who aren't recruiters or salespeople, LinkedIn still is a pretty important thing to have. And in fact, it's now, I would say, pretty much a hygiene factor, really. In the sense, if you don't have it, it just injects a bit of doubt. Why not? What are you hiding? These kind of perhaps irrational questions will start moving into the recruiters or the HR, the hiring manager's mind. And why would you want to cause that sense? You want to try and get this job is the idea. So,
the comments in the sidebar back that up. So, people are saying they've hired people who don't have LinkedIn profiles or any social profiles by recommendation. But I think that the majority of people are saying that for normal roles they would look, and maybe not for very technical candidates. But that's your niche. If you recruit in a niche where your candidates aren't on LinkedIn, you're not going to be looking for them on LinkedIn, are you? You just know that as a recruiter.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know what? It's not surprising that obviously recruiters are going to endorse LinkedIn, but I think we do know a little bit more about LinkedIn than the average person, especially this individual who's kind of stepped into the world there and stepped out of it, which kind of leads me to think, like, what is the experience of someone who's deleted LinkedIn and then decided to come back? Because you can do that, of course. So it's not like necessarily a permanent thing. Presumably that just means, let's say you have your contacts already in an email somehow, you'd be able to rebuild it quite quickly, won't you? So it may not be sort of a thing that would detonate your experience that much, but still, I would say it's kind of weird to get a timestamp of a person that's, set up his account in 2020. If you're a 40-year-old guy or 50-year-old person or whatever it is, presumably you would have had a little bit more understanding of the value of the platform, rather than have these kind of moments where you think, right, I'm going to get rid. A final point on this, Louise. Yeah, you've got me started. But a final point on this: even if you don't think it is valuable, you can kind of just leave it there, because it might just have a neutral sort of position. It may be completely passive for you, but you can at least fire it up. There's no need to trash it. It's almost like a spare computer you don't use. You just throw it in the trash, or do you just pack it away in case you do need it in future? Unless it's really causing you a massive problem, then I don't think you ever push the nuclear button unnecessarily. No way. Anyway, let's see what else was interesting, Louise. Was that it?
That was it. I mean, the rest of it was interesting, but they were the two things I thought I would highlight.
No worries. Hey, listen, this is super interesting as well, because Mark Dorman is here. However, there are 3 Marks and they're all just identified as Mark.
Invite them all on screen, see what happens.
That is exactly what I plan to do, because there's no other way to do this. So if you're a Mark watching this and you're not Mark Dorman, you may actually get an invite to come on screen. You're fully welcome to come on screen. That's the way it's going to go. I'm just going to go in what is alphabetical order here. So the first Mark.
I'm going to tell you which one it is. It's the Mark who's got the green background with the purple funny icon on it.
That doesn't help.
It's the second one down. It's not the red background and the purple. It's the green background and the purple.
Right, so that helps when I think I'm kind of colorblind as well, okay. Louise. That doesn't help. But
if you click on them, you can see their names. So if you click on it,
some Mark has been invited, and I hope this is Mark Dorman. So let's see whether we can make this work. You know what? I don't think I am colorblind, but there's certain colors I don't see particularly well. And I think this is true with the blues and greens. So sometimes I get quite confused about those. So I wonder. That is Mark Dorman.
There you go.
There he is.
The real Mark Dorman, please step forward.
Great. Mark, welcome to Brainfood Live On Air. Great to see you, and good morning to you. I believe it's early in the morning there for you in New York.
It's not too bad. Hi, Hung. Hi, Louise. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Excited.
No, a real pleasure to have you on the show, Mark. And for the people who don't know you, I wonder whether you could just quickly introduce yourself, who you are, and what it is you do.
Sure. So I'm Mark Dorman, the real Mark Dorman, not an avatar. So a real one. And I'm the CEO of SThree, which for those of you who may know, we're a pretty unique company. We're the only global pure play STEM specialist. And I took over actually in March last year. Prior to that, I'd spent, better part of, over 20 years in information software and services. So I'm a bit of a newbie to recruitment. So I'm looking to learn from you, Hung, just as much as I can give you my view on.
The first lesson I would impart to you, Mark, is don't take any cues from me. That's the first lesson I would say. But you know what? It's a fascinating career, and it's also a fascinating move by SThree to take someone from slightly outside the sort of tangential industry, if you like, and drop him into this senior role. So I'd be very interested to know, before we get into the speculation as to what the future of recruitment agencies are and all the rest of it. But what was the brief when they brought you on? I mean, was there a particular thing that the guys that owned SThree wanted you to achieve with the business and the brand?
Look, it was, really build on a lot of the legacy that had gone before at SThree. SThree, has had an incredible 34 years as an organization and has grown, almost exclusively organically. And, I'm the fourth CEO, the two predecessors, or three predecessors of mine being either one of the co-founders or people that started essentially their career at SThree. And so it's a little bit of looking for someone that's run a global business before, as we're getting to, that level of scale, and really build on the great work that had gone before at SThree.
Yeah, fantastic. Was there a reason why they decided to take someone from outside of the industry? Like, what did they think that you'd be able to give them that perhaps an in-industry person wouldn't?
So look, it probably blends into what we're going to talk about, around what the future holds for recruitment. Largely speaking, the industry still operates, for the most part. It's clearly, you talked about LinkedIn. It's, there are different tools and ways of operating. But largely, it's operated the same way that it has for a couple of decades, and it's not immune, like any industry, to areas of disruption and where the value lies as we move forward. So, I think there was a combination of, do we have the right strategy? And I'm happy to talk about that in terms of where we are and where our focus is, and what do we think the future is going to be? And have an executive that's been, in industries that have been pretty dramatically disrupted by technology, globalization, demographics, all those factors that are big trends impacting all industries. And certainly in the current environment, a big acceleration of a lot of those trends right now.
I was going to say, like, the timing of your move is actually kind of extraordinary, isn't it? Like, you must be thinking, wow, okay, this is a big industry change, number one. And then 12 months, even within the first 12 months, suddenly you have to confront an unprecedented crisis, and one that actually directly impacts recruitment, doesn't it? Like, crikey, like Louise and I were talking about, we're all also in the game, of course, in a different way, but we're all looking at it and thinking, you know what? Yes, there's positivity in different pockets, and of course, recruiters are inherently positive, optimistic people. I would say, as an industry, we're quite up, if you like, rather than down. But looking at it objectively and soberly, is that a word? Let's make it a word. It's looking pretty bad. Like, we need growing companies, growing economies, and everything is going the other way. So how have you dealt with that in particular, Mark?
Well, so the first thing is, we have a pretty resilient business. And, part of the reason I, was excited about the opportunity in SThree is, the focus on its strategy. And so we sit inside it, or at the center of two long-term secular trends, which are STEM talent. So we're exclusively science, technology, and engineering talent. So life sciences, tech, and engineering. And then the other thing is, it's funny now, everyone has this now in the lexicon, but we were talking about flexible working. So we have a blend, we're about 76%, what we call contract, but that manifests itself differently in lots of different ways around the world, and 24% permanent. So we think of it as, flexible working. And those two long-term secular trends, as we think about now, combined with our purpose of bringing skilled people together to build a future, those two things actually set us up pretty well to be resilient in the current environment. So if you think about, the types of talent that are needed right now in this moment, they're largely in life sciences, technology, and engineering. And if you think about a lot of the accelerated trends, again, that kind of talent that we're placing is, exactly the right thing. And our purpose of bringing skilled people together to build a future seems, more resonant now than even, perhaps 12 months ago.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, like I say, in some respects, I wouldn't say it is about fortune, because I'm sure there was strategy all the way down when SThree set up. I mean, you can't make a company like this so successfully at this type of rate without having some extraordinarily sort of strong strategic skill sets in there. But the fact that you're aligned exactly with the STEM sort of sector is so pertinent to where we're at now, because we can sort of see that there's lots of sectors that are going to get hammered, have been hammered, and actually may stay hammered, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I can't take any credit for that whatsoever. That was the already, the high level strategy there, but it's, we're spot on in terms of focusing on that kind of talent. And really it's now, how we structured the business, to get through the current environment was to put it into phases. And so we had, the initially, 3-4 months ago, an emergency response sort of phase, which was largely how do we make sure we keep our people, our clients, our candidates safe? How do we make sure, we have our operations working in that environment, which was, at one point we had 98% of our global population, which is just over 3,000 people in 16 countries, working remotely. Then we moved into where we are now, which is an ongoing management phase. And like at the core, this is a health crisis, so it's going to be volatile. So how do we just get better at operating in that volatile environment? And ultimately, when we solve the health crisis, at some point, we'll get back to a recovery and a next normal, whatever that looks like. So the combination of, the long-term strategy, structuring our actions around those phases has really helped us operate and be resilient, currently as we focus our business.
Let's talk straight away about one of those points, Mark. You talked about, hey, the emergency phase, we've got to just get everyone safe, which means obviously work from home, distributed, let's carry on best we can. A lot of people, a lot of the agencies even are now saying, you know what, some of these changes are going to be persistent for us. We've kind of evolved the way to work in this distributed way. We kind of like it. And in many respects, following in from a lot of these tech companies that almost every week, every day, we're seeing an announcement from a well-known tech business saying, you know what, going forward, we're now going to be remote only, or we're going to give people the choice to work from home, as a universal kind of right of being an employee there. What's the feeling at SThree on that particular point? Are you going to go for that, or do you think it's going to be back to office in some way at some point?
Look, I think there's going to, generally there's going to be life before COVID and life after COVID, and life after is going to look different. And part of that difference is going to be that more distributed, flexible working environment for people. And so, as I said, in this phase right now, we're focused on how do we adapt the business to operate in a way that allows us to be both distributed and in the office, depending on where it is. What it does, really raise, which is interesting for the industry generally, and certainly questions we're having at SThree, is what is the value of the office relative to other activities that we can do? So how do you use technology? How do you use communications? What management and training structures do you need to put in? And really have, deep and thoughtful conversations about, where's the value being added in those environments, and what are the pros and cons? And there are pros and cons of both elements.
You just touched on technology then, and obviously for some recruitment businesses, they're at a completely different stage to your organisation, and they've had to implement quite a lot more different technology in order to be able to work remotely. Have you had to specifically investigate and implement different technology in order for this to work for the last 12 weeks?
Yes and no, I think is the answer. So we had a pretty good backbone in terms of structure, but like every company in the world, when it's tested to the full, when you go from everyone working in the office to 98% of people working from home, It's a good test of your, business continuity planning. And so there was, a lot of work that the IT team did and did a yeoman's job in terms of getting everyone there and supported. And then, all of us, I know you've been doing your podcast and this is normal for you, but for many people, this, working and looking at a screen, and this is a primary way of communication, that's new. And quite frankly, the technology is the easy part. The methods of working, the management around that, different ways of operating, all of the stuff that surrounds the implementation of technology, as always, is always the harder part that we focused on.
I want to touch on this point particularly, Mark. So thank you for bringing it up, like the management aspect. Like back in my agency days, you were managed by almost like a line of sight type management. Like your manager would basically be sitting at desk. There'll be a desk, you're in a team, and he or she would be able to see your behavior. And that was the form of management that it was. It was almost like you have to keep performing, energy levels high, etc., do all of those things. And then it was kind of an informal style of management, but also very proximate in the sense the person's there, right? So there's no getting away with it, so to speak. Now, if so my agency days 10 years ago, so maybe that in that time has already shifted, but I suspect that still probably was the case pre-COVID in many cases, that the management was done at desk. How have you had to support your managers now that they have to manage a distributed team? Because that strikes me as quite a different skill set to manage people that are physically out of line of sight, that you're never going to see them. So have you put in any specific guidelines or have you learned anything from being the leader of a business that's had to shift this way?
So it's funny, right? So we've gone from, we operate in 16 different countries around the world, just over 3,200 people at the start of this. And essentially we've gone, broadly speaking, from all being in the office and being able to do that line of sight thing or speak to people, and actually use, as we were, working internationally, use of video was actually quite, pretty predominant in our organization anyway. But we've gone from that to being completely, at one point, as I said, 98% people, working from home. But I have to say the management team has never felt more connected because we're on these kinds of, media all of the time. And so there's a couple of things that we've done. So A is change some of the management, meeting structures. And that's become, I think the team would say, a little more intense, because the work has to speak for itself. There's no place to hide. And the other thing we've done is we've, invested a lot. And so, not just the technology team have done a phenomenal job in supporting the infrastructure, but learning and development, training, the management team. We've essentially, in 12 weeks, probably done 3 years worth of work in terms of creation of new training material and methods, and rolled it out really rapidly in a pretty agile way, and done a lot of, testing under fire to see what works and what doesn't. And so there's been a, pretty much a root and branch, adjustment in terms of how you manage by input. So that line of sight, what's the activity level look like? And that's how I'm going to measure people, to much more management by output and support. And, quite frankly, coming from outside the industry, that's where you'd get to anyway, because that's good management, is you manage people by output and you think about supporting people versus directing them. And so that's a big, dynamic change that we've gone there that's allowed us to, really keep the business running through this process.
You just touched on support then, and that's something else which I've very recently seen a case study for, because obviously, like Hung said, businesses are talking about not necessarily all coming back together. And it was about a call centre which had decided to allow everyone to work remotely. But it was causing quite a lot of stress for some of the staff. So when they had a really great call, there was nobody to look at and do this. And when they had a really awful call, there was nobody to go and stand in the kitchen with and say, I can't believe I've just had a awful experience. And I think it's the same in recruitment, is that it's fast paced. You have really great successes you want to celebrate, and then you have some shocking fallouts. How are you coping with that?
Well, so I have to say the management team and the managers locally have been incredibly creative. in terms of ways of, how do you celebrate and how do you commiserate together, and creating, if you like, new traditions. So there was, the standard way of operating that had gone on and very successful for a long period of time in the office, so that, we all win together and celebrate together in a specific way. And when someone's having a bad day, we support each other in a very specific way. Well, now you have to actively think about how you're doing that. And there's been a huge amount of creativity using, video or internal social channels to be able to, do that. And what it's also allowed is it to permeate beyond the physical boundaries of an office. So you're getting, global celebrations of specific things, and best practice, permeate the organization much faster. And that, rapid iteration of lessons is also allowed to, happen in a much more rapid pace. So yes, you need to be more active and thoughtful about how you're doing it, but actually it's freed up a lot of creative juices in the organization. And I have to say, very, very, very humble by the response of the management team in terms of their level of creativity in doing that.
You know what, that's fascinating when you mentioned, Mark, about the need to kind of reinvent the rituals. Because I'm sure one of the things that might have shocked you coming from outside of the industry when you came in is all of these like weird recruitment agency rituals that you see, the ringing of the bells and all of this chanting around. And, literally, if you're an alien observing this, you think, wow, what kind of, sort of sacred event has occurred here? Oh, it's a deal, something like this. So all of that now needs to be rethought, as you say. Like, what happens when someone does actually land a placement that she's been, reeling in for the last 6 months, and it's a big win, and it gets her over target or whatever. She's sitting there by herself and physically distant from everyone else. Like, where is that buzz? Where's that way in which you could boost it? But as you say, maybe we've just got to be more intentional with the tooling that we have and find a way to do that on the communication channels that we have. So anthropologically fascinating to see how all of this is like really moving into being reinvented, old traditions, some of these really. Quick question for you, Mark, actually. Are we going to recruit different types of people into the recruitment industry in light of what we've learned from this COVID period? So there's going to be some folks that literally have not been able to handle it of the shift, whether it's a tech literacy thing or whether it is this requirement for proximity. Some people I know actually do require physical proximity in order to function. And it just strikes me that maybe, are we potentially looking at changing the types of people we end up recruiting into sort of agencies going forward? Because we'll be looking for traits that would thrive in distributed environments, let's say.
So great question. And I think the short answer is yes. And I think that's a real opportunity for the industry to capture different types of talent and have more diversity at all levels in the organization. And, the primary difference being neurodiversity. So people that think a little differently, that gives you more access to different ideas. And, you're seeing that, enablement of creativity as a result of the current environment, that the best way of doing that is to have people with, different backgrounds, different cultural dynamics, different points of view on life to really test new ideas, because you can do it much more rapidly versus being, a little bit monocultural in terms of, the viewpoint of the industry. So I actually think it's a great opportunity for us to reach people. I think the other piece is, people are no longer bound by geography, right? So your proximity to the office, your ability to get to the office and be in an office isn't the barrier. So whether you're, a carer at home of children or other people, whether you're differently abled, people from different backgrounds that actually have real skills to bring to bear and really engage. Because if you think about, what we do as an industry, we match people. Right. So it's a people business. So the more diversity you have supporting that, the greater opportunity there is for everyone in terms of lifting those boats. And if I think specifically of the sectors we operate within, within STEM, within life science, technology and engineering, there's a huge supply constraint on the types of people that we can go and access. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to go and reach, different communities that have been underserved by, the industry, because we've been similar type of people looking for the similar type of people with similar type of biases, is we can expand that out as we look to place that talent.
I saw something on LinkedIn yesterday, which is kind of connected to this, which is that you would think that going forward for a recruitment business or any business, you would realise that you don't need to be recruiting in a specific geographic area. And this was a company who was hiring for a remote role. You would work from home, but they still wanted the person to live in Scotland. So it's a Scottish company and they wanted the person to live in Scotland. So right now, you would think this was, if anything's going to change, it would be right now, where you would say everyone's working from home, so therefore you can work anywhere in the world. Maybe in our time zone is important. I mean, that really surprised me. I mean, when you're hiring consultants, if you're onboarding people now, are you concerned where they live geographically now?
It depends, right? So as you look globally, cultural dynamic is in play here. And so in some, countries, culturally, you do want people to fit in, and there's a certain cultural dynamic of geographic proximity. In other countries, there's not. And that's true of industry and skill set as well. If you've got a really niche skill that is absolutely critical, then that's going to be the primary driver of who you're trying to recruit, versus in other situations, cultural fit might be the most important one, and therefore proximity to a particular region is going to be relatively important. But I do think that those barriers are beginning to come down as people get comfortable with the notion of working remotely, because I think there was this little bit of haves and have-nots, whether that's a technological divide or a management divide of I can tell you that through this crisis, the need for our service, certainly in our contingent business, is our customers are asking for more service, not less, because even those that rely on and contingent workforces don't necessarily know how to manage remote workforces. They have suffered all the same challenges as we just talked about, and so I think this is forcing a lot of rethinking of how you manage your talent globally, and what you want to have predominant as your key criteria in the organization.
You know what? It's very interesting you mentioned contingent work there, Mark. Do you know right now with SThree what the maybe you don't have the data on it, but if you do, it'd be great to know what the kind of percentage of the pie in terms of revenue is coming from contingent recruiting activities compared to retained, let's say, or things that are a little bit more structured up front. Is that mix changing in any way? Is it part of the strategy to change? Has COVID changed it in any respect?
So we don't publicly share that specific piece of data. So I'd love to tell you, but look, I think the rethinking of those normal models is certainly something that's going to be driven by the current environment, in terms of how do you match the value you're adding with the placement of people in workforce management, and what's your flexible labor versus your labor you want to hire permanently. So if you use that split, and I'm not sure, as an outsider coming in, it's interesting to me that we, versus being a hiring manager, that you have this permanent contract split in terms of the way we operate. So I understand the nature of operating. But if you think as a CEO that's looking at, I have problems to solve with the most important asset I have, which is people, I think of it as a whole problem to solve. Some of it will be permanent people. Some of it will be, more temporary, whether those are independent contractors or employed contractors or whatever flavor it might be. And so I think there's certainly going to be more of a move towards thinking about how do you solve your clients' problems and what's the best fit for that. So we see that as, the need for flexible, that's what we call it, flexible in labor, versus having those, industry orthodoxies historically between contingent and retained as a business model, and between contract and permanent as a structured nation. Now, there's ways of delivering it that are clearly very different operationally. And, the dynamic is very different on the individual that's being placed. But as you think about serving your client's need, it's getting closer to them in terms of what problem you're trying to solve, what services are you going to add, and how do you understand the whole system problem versus just that individual transaction that you're working on right now. So I think that's, the move that we're really focused on. And if I think of a high level, we spoke to, through this, over 300 of our best clients globally. They're looking for additional services to help them think about how they get particularly STEM talent to help solve their immediate and future problems in a different way.
Yeah, so agencies really have to have this total talent management attitude, really, don't they? It's not like just like chucking in a bunch of contractors or whatever. That mentality's got to go. It's really about understanding what the customer problem is at a holistic level, and then being able to kind of put some solutions in. And it could be a mix of all of those things rather than what your go-to is. One of the problems, though, on this is that how companies or recruitment agencies are internally structured often is one of the main problems. So, for instance, if the business is structured, you are a permanent recruiter, or you are a contract recruiter, or you do this, then your incentives are aligned purely to get or even encourage your customer to go down the way in which you can supply. How are you thinking of managing that issue, that disalignment between what the customer really wants and the individual agent level, where if he's in the permanent division, he's going to obviously want to try and get the permanent recruitment nudged client towards the permanent recruitment side?
Well, the great news is we're not the first industry in the world that stumbled on this problem, and the key normally is your customer. In terms of how do you really understand those different kinds of customers, and how do you align to where they see the value. And part of the challenge that I see the industry has is you really have this cognitive dissonance between ask any CEO and they'll say problem number one or number two is talent, and then I'll delegate it to a different part of the organization, so it's not getting the same line of sight at the C-suite, if you like, with your CXOs as other types of problems. And so therefore it predominates. So you've really got to be with your customers and really try to get to why is that happening? Why is there that delegation of their number one, number two top strategic challenge that they have, and align it. And I think once we understand what those dynamics are, you can probably build solutions around that covers the problem. I think the other piece, if I think about it, is we have a highly mediated industry with human activity that we haven't disassembled yet to say, okay, where's the highest value point for humans, and where's the mundane activity that actually could be automated at scale. And I think that's the wave of stuff that will be coming in. We're at the core doing a pretty human activity. So it's not that you're going to have robot recruiters in the sky doing everything, right? That's not going to happen, well, not until we get to the singularity, but we're a little way off from that. But certainly technology at its best will enable you to think about those services, and the distinction between actually how you deliver a permanent person and how you deliver contract is very different. But the solving the problem part might not be that different. So until you disassociate those two things from the business model, it's actually hard to do that. I think you're going to be led by your customers in terms of what that time frame looks like, to be able to do that.
I see that Joe has said something in the sidebar, which is absolutely true. But so she says there can't be any superficial agency relationships anymore. And we put this out on LinkedIn. There was a ton of comments. And John O'Sullivan, who runs Elite Leaders, knows the recruitment agency space incredibly well, says it's going to be more about meaningful and consultative relationships between recruiters and clients. But the good ones always knew that. So this health crisis, COVID-19, has not changed that at all. Last time I recruited was 20-something years ago. That was the case then. So how do we think this current crisis is going to make any difference. We've been through 3 recessions since then, and there's still lots of recruiters who do have very superficial relationships, and there's still lots of hiring managers who use them.
Well, this is what I want to say. If I can just jump in there, I know John Sullivan very well. Actually, he was one of my ex-bosses right early back in the day, and he's been banging the drum for this kind of high-quality stuff. By the way, John, I love you, man. I'm totally on board with that vibe. But we have to deal with the fact that transactional recruiters can be a successful business, and we have to deal with the reality of it. That's got to be because there's a demand for that service. I mean, we can say yes. I mean, Joe, you're totally right as well. You know, let's not be transactional. Let's go up the value chain. Let's do all of those positive things. But at core, there's still plenty of business to be had of behavior, if you like, that, you know, a lot of people might have a problem with, but it still is effective from a commercial point of view. So I think there's an element where rhetorically we might want to go in this direction, but the reality is kind of in here, and we've got to kind of grasp that part of it. Like, why is it that companies are prepared to work with so-called, you know, cowboy style recruiters or high volume type spec recruiters or whatever? Maybe because that's what they want. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Can I just quickly chip in? I said something 2 weeks ago. I never ever give my opinion on anything, but I did say I think that broadly speaking, recruitment companies, hiring managers get the recruiter they deserve. Because if you're not prepared to ask for a better service, if you're prepared to put your job out to 6 different agencies and just, you know, go with the one who gives you the lowest fee, and you know, don't you deserve to get a pretty shonky service?
So I think it comes down to the core of what's your value and how your business model aligns with that value. And so if you're trading on a transaction that's a commodity, then that's largely how that business is going to operate. If you're trading on, you know, I'm actually helping solve problems, and actually it's critical within the process or aligning with the strategic direction of a business, then you're going to have a very different relationship, because the hiring managers' incentives are very different. And so I think that's why, you know, certainly from my perspective and all the other industries that, you know, I've worked in, it's how do you deeply understand what your customers' needs are? And those are unarticulated, not necessarily articulated. And how do you align your business with that? And so if you think of what we do, which, as I said, is deliver the single most valuable asset any company has, certainly as you head towards the 4th industrial revolution, which is talent, as you move towards a knowledge economy that's based on IP versus sweat of the brow type activities, you know, that's going to become increasingly important. And certainly, you know, from an SThree perspective, that's where we're focused on. So, and particularly in our talent that we place is, you know, if you want, you know, a leader in life sciences or technology or engineering, you've deeply got to understand the problem that your client is trying to solve, so you can match them with, you know, the right person in that space, and particularly with a technical skill, because, you know, people with the right technical background and skill very rarely fail because they didn't have the right technical skill. It's largely a cultural dynamic. So that human element of were expectations matched on both sides to actually be able to deliver the right kind of value is critically important. And so having those, you know, non-superficial relationships, understanding the value you're going to deliver is really key.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great answer, Mark. And given the fact you're answering questions, there are questions that have been asked in the function and on Crowdcast here. So, folks, if you've got any questions for Mark, please ask them in the Ask a Question function. That's when we're going to go and grab them now. So let's go tackle these now, Mark, whilst we've got you. These are from the guests, so let's see what they say. We've got Lee Candioti. Lee is saying, Mark, what event or metric will confirm for you that the health crisis is over, quote unquote? So, you know, let's say we're in this period of emergency, we're kind of, you know, having these plans. At what point are you switching to the new normal, the new permanent? This is how it's going to be.
So the rather unfortunate answer, I think, is going to be, we'll probably know it when we get there, or as we're getting there. But I think it's going to be a combination of factors, which is going to be, we get either therapeutics or a vaccine at enough scale that people aren't concerned about catching this particular virus. And the manifestation of that is nobody's concerned that a trip to a fish market will result in the shutdown of a 20 million population city. I mean, I think that's ultimately where you get to. And I think that's why right now we're until you solve the core health issue, we're going to be in this in a volatile way for some time to come. It's permeated. It's really contagious. Affects different populations very differently, and so we're going to be in this highly volatile situation for some time, and we'll kind of know when we get there. But it's going to be around solving the health problem.
Yep, great answer. Louise, should I keep going with these questions? You think?
I can ask the next one.
Go on.
Does SThree still predominantly hire trainees and grads into consultant positions, and how do you train and coach them remotely? Have you had to onboard anybody remotely since this has started?
Yes, we are onboarding some people, and so we've been thoughtful about how we do that. But that's a great question, and one of the short answer is yes, we do still predominantly hire that, but obviously, we're as I said, as you think about this opportunity to have more diverse employee populations, that's making us think about, is that right globally for us to continue to do that? And we're thinking about actually how are we going to train and coach them remotely? What are the tools and capabilities to do that? And so I don't have a good answer right now because we're right in the process of working through that. But yes, that's something we're all going to have to come to terms with.
I'm going to let you ask the next one because I wasn't entirely sure I understood it.
You asked the question yourself, Louise. Are you saying you failed to understand your own question?
Well, I pasted it from LinkedIn.
That's okay. Let me give it a shot. Okay, this is a question from Louise, and Louise asks, Jacob is asking. This is from LinkedIn, I think. Which elements will keep the world of agency? Oh, right. I see why you can't understand this. World of agency have a business case in which the world of companies able to buy HR tech automation, which can be for the most part. This is such a Jacob question because it's basically 5 different clauses mashed into a single question.
Is he asking whether if in-house recruiters can buy in the same tech, do they need agencies? Is that what he's asking?
I think we got to say that's what he's asking. So let's give Mark that. Mark, there's your question.
So it's interesting. This is at the core of a lot of the questions we have about recruitment generally, right? Which is, what's our value? Why are we there? Aren't we going to be disintermediated by something, right? Whether it's technology, a platform, something or other. And those of us that are old enough, and I'm old enough to be at Web 1.0 in the information data businesses, that Web 1.0 is going to do exactly the same thing. And if you think about the core of what we do, it's curation, and curation's really, really hard, right? And as I said, until we get to the singularity, the human elements of curation are really different. They're almost impossible to do with machines. And so there's no doubt that our clients, our customers will become more sophisticated and have technology that allows them to get access to more information. But their job is not the curation of talent and finding the right person for the right role at the right time with matched expectations, because you've got people there. And so I think actually the more information, more tools become available, as has happened in other industries. If we fix on the value that we actually add, will become more important, not less important, because the more data and technology, the harder curation actually becomes. And you see that in many other industries that have happened. But what you do see is, to the question that we had, or discussion point we had earlier on, that the low value commodity stuff will begin to disappear, and it will be the stuff that's very focused on actually adding real value.
Yep, fascinating. Final question on from the crowd here, and this is one from Colin McNichol, and he's talking about: are you seeing a recovery of activity in APAC yet? So this is about sort of geographical distribution of economic activity. Mark, from your sort of views as an operator of a global recruiting business, are you seeing different sort of regions bounce back?
So yeah, I think the answer is it depends, right? So it depends which part of Asia you're in. And so you've got parts that have been through the first wave of the health crisis and have a government response and did really well out of it, will be coming back. You've got others that are already in the second or third phase of going in and out. So if I think of, Singapore, for example, they have their circuit breaker on right now. I think it's coming off next week. And so, you've got a lot of these competing forces, and that's why, we broke it into that phase of ongoing management that's volatile. This isn't a straight line where you go down and then you go back up with bumps. It's going to be in and out of this stuff as you see health crisis, government response to health crisis. Depending on what government's response is, you get economic impacts from that. And then really, you're going to have, various waves of lockdowns that are going to be, localized or regionalized. And we're going to have to respond to that over a period of time until we get to, solving the core health problem. So that's a long-winded answer, I'm afraid, to, yes, but it depends which market and what stage they're in. And, I think we're just going to have to deal with the volatility.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make, because I think we're a little bit still just reading the media. We're fixated on the idea of which kind of recovery we might be getting, a V-shaped curve, a U-shaped curve, or whatever. But it may just be one of these peaks and troughs, because we might need to keep going back and oscillating into this lockdown scenario, because it's a volatile situation, as you say. That's very, very much worth emphasizing. Mark, we've only got a couple more minutes left, so I just wanted to pitch a few final question for you, actually, because a lot of the folks who sign up to watch and listen to you here are themselves business owners of recruitment agencies, or they're people who are operating as third-party recruiters themselves. Without unveiling any like secret sources from SThree's kind of cookbook, but what kind of advice would you give to a business owner right now who struggling with revenue, struggling with acquisition of customers, retention of customers, morale of staff, all of those types of challenges that you've had to encounter? What have you learned in this period of time that you can impart onto others that can maybe help them a little bit get through this process?
So, look, I think you've got to think on two levels. So the first level is, what does short-term survival look like? And, how do you, so if I think of our, framework, keeping your people safe. So our people, clients and candidates safe, making sure you can operate, and making sure you've got an economically viable business. So that's got to be priority number one in the short term, to make sure that you can actually do that. And then there's a case of looking through this in terms of actually which customers and clients am I serving? What value do I add? And is my strategy on point now and for the future? And if I can, steer towards that waypoint and manage through the volatility on those short terms, it's trying to manage on those two timeframes, so that, when you get through this onto the other side, you're not making short-term decisions unless it's about survival. And let's be clear, many people are worried about survival, and that's, job number one is making sure you survive. But once you've got, in that hierarchy of need, you've got that solved, then it's a real thinking about, let's stay close to my clients and customers and understand what's the real value I add. What is my secret sauce that I can go and sell and add value? And how do I make sure that I'm manifesting that as best I can and preserving that, now and for the future? And is anything in the environment making that change? Do I need to make a course correction, for example? So I think that, it's on those two frames. Is, job number one is, let's make sure I've got a viable business, because without that, I can't do anything. And then, looking forward, and, my view is always, let's stay as close to your clients and customers as you can. And they'll normally tell you the answer if you spend time with them.
Yeah, fantastic. Mark, what a fantastic sort of 45 minutes it's been sort of sharing a conversation with you. It's been fascinating. I think we could continue to go on, but optimal time for webinars is about an hour. It's actually less than an hour. So I don't want to sort of drag you any more into your day on this, but hopefully you've enjoyed it, Mark, and we can get you back at a later point. Great to get your inputs and all of these other things that are happening in our industry that are so fascinating, be it technology, politics, we're talking about next week, all kinds of different topics. So let me leave you here, Mark. I want to wish you a good day and also best of luck with piloting SThree. And I hope you've enjoyed taking part in Brainfood Live.
It's been great. Thank you very much, Hang and Louise. Great to see you. Hopefully it's been helpful, and love to come back and join the conversation. Some great stuff you're doing.
Great stuff. Take care, Mark.
Thank you.
What a nice guy, hey?
Super.
And you know what? I didn't even realize that he was Scottish either. And I thought, Mark Dorman from New York, he's going to come in with a New York accent, but no, sounds like possibly from Fife or somewhere, Anyway, really, really, I hope everyone enjoyed that. By the way, we're coming to the end of the show. I just wanted to get a bit of feedback from you, actually. If you enjoyed that type of show, this type of format where there's a single guest rather than roll on like loads of different guests, please let me know if this is the kind of format actually you enjoy. Just put a comment below into whatever chat stream you're on. Is this better than the multi-guest type of approach that we previously had? So 45 minutes with one guest compared to, let's say, 15, 20 minutes with 3 guests where we bring them on and off on a particular topic. Really love to get your feedback on that, because that will help me understand whether this is the sort of thing we should try and experiment with as well. Listen, thank you everyone for watching Brainfood Live on Air. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you, Louise Triance. I keep messing your name up. Triance, Triance.
Honestly,
Triance.
You sometimes get my first name wrong, so don't worry about it.
I know. I call all Louise Lewises. I don't know why that is. I mean, maybe it's like some inherent laziness, failing to press an E, the additional keystroke, can't it? But no, thank you so much for coming on. I'd love to get you back. You've got loads of things to talk about. In fact, maybe there's other things. Essentially, I published the schedule for July next week. So we'll have a look at some of those topics. If you want to come back as a guest or co-host, we'll definitely do that. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your week. I hope you've loved this show. We'll be back next week. We are talking politics. We've got Jim Stroud with us. Obviously, we've got lots of things we need to discuss. What is the role of HR and recruitment when it comes to politics? Do recruiters and HR actually take a position on some of these things, or do we drive it neutral and allow all voices to have this chat? And is that in itself a political position? So it's a little bit of a weird one, but we're all in it. I think we're all a little bit trepidatious. If I'm going on LinkedIn, do I talk politics or not? Don't know. I'm thinking about it because, rather than just blurting it out, I'm thinking, do people want me to say this? So I think it is on everyone's mind. So that's happening next week. Make sure you sign up to the newsletter as well. We've got a stonking issue for you on Sunday. And we will see you next week on Friday, I think. So have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks a lot.